My name is Dr. Sarah Martinez, and I'm about to tell you the most extraordinary story of my career as a forensic anthropologist. 3 years ago, the scientific community was shaken by the disappearance of Dr. Marcus Reed, one of the most respected explorers of our time. Marcus had dedicated his life to uncovering the secrets of the Amazon rainforest, and his expeditions had led to groundbreaking discoveries about ancient civilizations. I remember the day his disappearance was announced like it was yesterday. Marcus had been leading a small team deep into the uncharted regions of the Brazilian Amazon, following indigenous legends about a lost city called Jacana, the place of eternal whispers. His last radio contact came on March 15, 2022, at exactly 3:47 p.m. His voice crackled through the static. "Sarah, we found something incredible. The cave system here, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. The acoustics are impossible. I can hear voices from centuries ago." That was the last anyone heard from Marcus Reed or his three-person team. The Brazilian authorities launched an extensive search operation that lasted 4 months. They found their abandoned campsite, scattered equipment, and Marcus's journal with entries that became increasingly erratic toward the end. The final entry, dated the day he disappeared, contained only one line: "The cave remembers everything." I had worked with Marcus on several expeditions and I knew him better than most. He wasn't prone to superstition or flights of fancy. Marcus was methodical, scientific, rational. That's what made his disappearance so haunting. The search teams combed through hundreds of square miles of dense jungle, but it was as if Marcus and his team had simply vanished into thin air. The case was eventually closed and Marcus Reed was declared legally dead. But I never stopped thinking about those final words. The cave remembers everything. What had he found in that jungle? And more importantly, what had found him? 3 years passed before fate decided to reveal its hand. I was contacted by a grizzled hunter named João Santos, a man who had spent 40 years navigating the Amazon's most treacherous regions. João's English was broken, but his urgency was unmistakable. He claimed to have found something that belonged to Dr. Reed, something hidden in a cave that defied all logic. I flew to Manaus immediately and met João at a small riverside cafe. His weathered hands shook as he placed an object on the table between us: Marcus's digital recorder, the same one I had seen him use countless times during our expeditions together. But this recorder should have been destroyed by 3 years of jungle humidity and rainfall. Instead, it looked pristine, as if it had been preserved in perfect conditions. "Senhora Doctora," João whispered, his eyes darting nervously around the cafe, "this cave, it is not natural. I have hunted these lands since I was a boy, but I have never seen anything like this. The walls, they shine with a light that comes from within. And the sounds." He shuddered. "The sounds that come from the deep chambers, they are not of this world." João explained that he had been tracking a wounded jaguar when he stumbled upon a narrow opening concealed behind a curtain of vines. The entrance was so well hidden that he might have missed it entirely if not for the strange humming sound emanating from within. Against his better judgment, he ventured inside and discovered a vast cave system with walls that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The recorder had been sitting on a natural stone shelf, approximately 50 meters from the entrance, as if someone had carefully placed it there. When João touched it, the device activated automatically and Marcus's voice began to play. But according to João, the recording contained information that had never been there before, conversations and discoveries that seemed to span years beyond Marcus's disappearance. I knew I had to see this cave for myself. Despite João's obvious fear and reluctance, I convinced him to guide me back to the location. As we prepared for the journey, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to uncover something that would challenge everything I thought I knew about the natural world. The journey to the cave took us 3 days through some of the most challenging terrain I had ever encountered. João led the way with the silent expertise of someone who had made the jungle his home, but I could see the tension in his shoulders increasing with each step toward our destination. On the 3rd morning, he stopped abruptly and pointed to a wall of vegetation that looked identical to everything surrounding it. "There," he whispered. "Behind those vines." As we pushed through the green curtain, I felt a subtle change in the air pressure. And then I saw it, an opening that seemed to exhale a faint phosphorescent mist. The entrance was roughly circular, about 8 feet in diameter, and the walls appeared to be made of a smooth, dark stone that I couldn't immediately identify. But what struck me most was the sound Joao had described, a low, harmonious humming that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. I activated my equipment and began documenting everything. My electromagnetic field detector immediately began registering unusual readings, and the temperature dropped noticeably as we ventured deeper into the cave. The walls were indeed luminescent, emitting a soft blue-green light that reminded me of bioluminescent organisms, but these appeared to be mineral formations unlike anything in the geological literature. 50 meters in, exactly where Joao had said it would be, Marcus's recorder sat on a natural stone shelf. But as I examined the area more closely, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The shelf wasn't natural at all. It had been carved with intricate symbols that resembled no known writing system. The recorder sat in a perfectly shaped depression, as if the shelf had been specifically designed to hold it. When I activated the device, Marcus's familiar voice filled the cave with an intensity that the acoustics amplified into something almost supernatural. But the recordings Joao had described were indeed there, and they contained details about discoveries that should have been impossible. Marcus spoke of finding chamber after chamber filled with crystalline formations that seemed to store and replay sounds from the past. He described hearing conversations between indigenous peoples from centuries ago, Spanish conquistadors, and even earlier expeditions that had apparently discovered the cave system. But the most disturbing recordings came from what appeared to be recent entries made long after Marcus's disappearance. In these recordings his voice had changed, becoming more urgent and sometimes speaking in languages I didn't recognize. He spoke of understanding the cave's true purpose, of becoming part of something vast and eternal, and of preparing for others who would inevitably find their way to this place. Against Joao's desperate protests, I insisted we venture deeper into the cave system. The recordings had mentioned specific chambers and I was determined to find them. As we descended through narrow passages that opened into vast underground spaces, the humming grew stronger, and I began to understand what Marcus had meant about the impossible acoustics. Every sound we made seemed to echo not just through space but through time itself. I could hear fragments of our conversation repeating back to us minutes later, but mixed with other voices, some speaking Portuguese, others in Spanish, and still others in languages that sounded ancient beyond measure. The cave wasn't just reflecting sound, it was storing it, layering it, and somehow preserving it indefinitely. In the third chamber, we discovered the first evidence of Marcus's extended presence. A makeshift camp had been established with supplies that should have lasted weeks, not years. But the most shocking discovery was a series of notebooks filled with Marcus's handwriting, documenting discoveries and observations that spanned the entire 3 years since his disappearance. The final entries were dated just 2 weeks before our arrival. According to these journals, Marcus had discovered that the cave system was far more than a natural formation. The luminescent minerals weren't just pretty stones, they were part of a vast biological network that had been growing for millennia. The cave was alive, in a sense, and it had developed the ability to preserve not just sounds but memories, experiences, and even consciousness itself. Marcus wrote about indigenous legends that spoke of Yakana not as a lost city, but as a living entity that chose certain individuals to become its guardians. These chosen ones didn't die in the conventional sense. They became part of the cave's eternal memory, their consciousness woven into the crystalline network that lined every surface. They could communicate with the cave, access the stored experiences of previous guardians, and even influence the physical world beyond the cave's boundaries. But the most terrifying revelation came in Marcus's final journal entry. He wrote that the selection process wasn't random. The cave had been calling to specific individuals for centuries, drawing them with manufactured clues and orchestrated discoveries. My involvement wasn't coincidental. The cave had been preparing for my arrival since the moment Marcus first contacted me about his final expedition 3 years ago. As the full weight of Marcus's revelation settled over me, I heard footsteps echoing from deeper within the chamber. My heart nearly stopped as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Marcus Reed, but changed in ways that defied explanation. His skin had taken on the same luminescent quality as the cave walls, and his eyes reflected the blue-green light with an intensity that was both beautiful and terrifying. "Hello, Sarah," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate from the walls themselves. "I knew you would come. The cave told me you would be the next guardian." Joao screamed and ran back toward the entrance, but I found myself rooted to the spot, not by fear, but by an overwhelming sense of recognition. Everything Marcus had written was true. I could feel the cave's consciousness touching mine, showing me visions of the centuries of guardians who had come before, each one chosen for their unique abilities to serve the cave's greater purpose. Marcus explained that the cave was ancient beyond human comprehension, a biological computer that had been collecting and preserving human knowledge and experience for over 10,000 years. Each guardian added their consciousness to the collective, but retained their individuality within the vast network. They weren't dead, they were evolved, transformed into something greater than human. But why me? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Because you understand both science and mystery, Marcus replied. The cave needs someone who can bridge the gap between the ancient wisdom of previous guardians and the modern knowledge of the outside world. The time of hiding is ending, Sarah. Humanity is approaching a crossroads, and the cave's knowledge will be essential for what's coming. As Marcus spoke, I realized that my entire career had been leading to this moment. My expertise in forensic anthropology, my fascination with ancient civilizations, even my friendship with Marcus, all of it had been orchestrated by the cave's influence, preparing me for this choice. I looked at Marcus, no longer the man I had known but something far more complex and eternal, and I understood that I was standing at the threshold of my own transformation. The cave offered immortality, infinite knowledge, and the chance to help guide humanity through the challenges ahead. But it also meant leaving behind everything I had ever known about what it meant to be human. The humming of the cave grew stronger, and I realized it wasn't just sound. It was a question, patient and eternal, waiting for my answer. As I placed my hand on the luminescent wall, feeling the warm pulse of ancient consciousness flowing through the crystal network, I knew that my old life was ending and something incredible was about to begin. The last thing I recorded on my own device before I became part of something infinitely larger was this: the cave doesn't just remember everything, it prepares for everything. And now it's preparing for you.